And Jamil Jaffer now. He worked for the DOJ under former President Bush. He is now the founder and executive director of the National Security Institute. To talk more about what we know, and I guess at this point, Jamil, what we don't know. So much of this seems to go back to those 15 boxes removed from the National Archive. The question is, what evidence do they have? What are they looking for? And at this point, did they find it?
Well, it's a great question, Marnie. One of the things we have to figure out is what was in those 15 boxes that our National Archives got back. Clearly, there was enough in there that they were able to convince a federal judge that there was probable cause to believe a crime had been committed. That crime could be the failure to properly keep federal records or to preserve them, presidential records, or, as some people have suggested, classified material. If, in fact, in those 15 boxes there was classified material, that might be enough of a basis for the judge to grant a probable cause search warrant to go down and see if there are more classified materials or presidential records or federal records there at Mar-a-Lago.
Another wrinkle in all of this, something that's being batted around about the potential claim that Donald Trump would have declassified any of these documents before leaving the White House. What issue does that pose?
That's a real challenge. The president, of course, has original classification authority. That means that he can determine what is and what is not classified. It means he can also declassify information. Now, typically, you'd execute a declassification order, but that's not, necessary. The president in the past, as we know, has tweeted out what people believe are classified overhead surveillance pictures of an Iranian missile site. So the president could declassify things in stream. He might argue that before taking those boxes down to Mar-a-Lago that he declassified all the material in there. That may be part of a challenge for the Justice Department in proving up any charges they might bring associated with classified documents, putting aside any Federal Records Act or Presidential Records Act violations.
Obviously, the concern, Jamil, with the retention of any classified documents is the national security implications that would pose. Talk about the Republicans right now who are calling the search potentially politically motivated, the sensitive timing of all of this, what this means. You roll it forward to 2024. There are layers and layers to what they may find and the possible consequences.
Well, look, Marnie, of course, there's always going to be a challenge if you ever search the home of a president, a former president. That's going to raise political questions and claims of political bias on the part of the Justice Department, if in particular, if as here, it's a different party. That being said, the removal and improper storage of classified materials is a big deal if you think about it. There are confidential secret materials. Those have to be stored in safes inside of a building. But top secret and top secret sensitive compartmented information, which this may or may not have been, has to be stored inside what's known as a SCIF, a sensitive compartmented information facility. As far as we know, that's not what was done at Mar-a-Lago. If, in fact, it was any of that kind of material, that opens up the possibility that that kind of material could have been obtained or accessed by foreign nationals, and that's a real problem. Even if the president did declassify it, it's still highly sensitive information if it was classified at one time at the TS top secret sensitive compartmented information level.
Well, and the issue then, Jamil, criminal charges, the possibility moving forward.
Yeah, there could be criminal charges brought for certain violations of the Presidential Records Act, the Federal Records Act, and certain violations of the Classified Information Protection Act or the classified procedures around that. The hard thing is, of course, bringing criminal charges against a former sitting president, is a real challenge. It continues to raise the questions about political behavior. And even if the Justice Department is successful at bringing those charges and even convicting the president, I think that, there's going to be claims made by his supporters that it was all politically motivated and ginned up. That's going to be very hard for the Justice Department and the FBI to avoid. They have got to have considered that question at the highest levels, as your correspondent pointed out, at the level of Attorney General Merrick Garland. And, it looks like they made the call to go ahead with the search, but it's an uphill battle, certainly, at least in the political arena.
Yeah, well, to go to these links, gain approval from a federal judge, get to this point, highly controversial. There must be some evidence there. At least you're led to assume that. Before I let you go, what's the next step? How soon before we actually have some definitive answers as to what they were looking for and what they found?
Well, at a minimum, the president likely has, or his lawyers likely have, a copy of the search warrant that was served upon them. They can put that out there, tell us what the basis for the search warrant was, the potential statutes being investigated, as well as what was discovered. That's usually left behind. And so, they could release that. If they don't, the Justice Department probably waits, because they're before a grand jury right now, until some charges are brought. They really can't reveal any grand jury information since there's an ongoing investigation. So even if they wanted to come forward, I think it will be hard for them to do so. And we'll have to see what happens going forward. And the only time this really comes out is if charges are brought, Marnie.
Right. And a big if. All right, Jamil, Jaffer, as always, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
We will continue to follow this. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.